welcome to Inside Pleasantville School District. I'm Emily Rubin Persons, your host and also Board of Ed trustee. You know, emotional intelligence is the new buzz, right? It refers to the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions as well as the emotions of others. Some children and also some grown-ups, they seem to have been born with this unbelievable strength of internal awareness. And we know that this is a skill that takes time to learn. How do we feel? How do we manage the feelings that other people have? How do we help ourselves? How do we help our children? Some of our children really do struggle with this. Some of our grown-ups do as well. And it does lead to some choosing of unhealthy ways of coping. And so here with me today is Mary Ann Flatley, our Student Assistant Services Coordinator. Student Assistant...
Counselor.
Counselor.
Yes.
I know. When I wrote, okay, I have counselor. I was about to say coordinator.
That works.
So, right, that works. So here we are in this crazy new world of COVID and hybrid scheduling, and your work is probably a little bit more challenging. But why don't you, many of us know you in the district, but why don't you tell us just a snapshot of who is Mary Ann Flatley?
Sure, yes. I'll start from the top.
Okay.
I think for those people who are not, familiar with my role, I am the student assistance counselor. I've worked for student assistants for 7 years. This is my 6th school year, believe it or not, in Pleasantville.
6th, wow.
Yes. Student Assistance Services is a substance abuse prevention agency in Westchester County. I am one of about 35 licensed counselors or social workers working in districts throughout Westchester County, providing...
35, that's a lot. That's
yes,
great.
Yes, there's a lot of representation throughout Westchester County. I have coworkers in Yonkers all the way up to Peekskill and, a lot of districts in between. So we're well represented. We're doing important prevention work.
Really important work. Right, and so you work in the high school.
I do, yes.
Right, and what are some of the things that you're working on that you do with our students in the high school?
I would say this school year in particular, given, as you referenced how challenging of a school year it is, I think it's really important to, first of all, acknowledge that while we're all facing this collective challenge, every student, every family is really being affected in different ways. Really important just to acknowledge that, however anybody's feeling is valid. So, there can be feelings of sadness, grief, loss, and at the same time, you are able to experience hope and optimism, for, sort of a brighter future. And I think that that's sort of a theme that has really resonated in the middle school and the high school this school year. I would say for my work this year, there's extra focus on sort of universal prevention. So when I think of my role, I think of it as I kind of wear 2 hats. One is counseling, one is universal prevention, where I'm sort of a prevention specialist, I think is my title. And that's really classroom work. So this year I've been really fortunate to be able to, in the middle school and the high school, push into more classrooms. Right. So in the middle school, for instance, I'm teaming up with the school counselors and the school psych department, including the psych interns, to do advisory periods where we push in, talk to students about timely issues, challenges, successes, allow students to hear from each other about what's not going well, what is going well.
Right. And that adds to their intelligence, the normalizing the conversation, because so many kids have been told how to feel, what to feel, don't worry about this, oh, you should be worried about that, well, I'm not really worried about that, or whatever. Right. So to enable them to identify a feeling and that it is valid.
Absolutely, and it's really powerful for students to hear from other students about some of the feelings that they're having, because then, like you said, they don't feel alone in it, and it's more normalized. I think that's been really great. In the high school, we have been able to use PE as a time to really connect with students. We've had an expansion to the DBT Steps A program this school year. So just for some history, it is the 3rd school year right now where in 5th grade and 9th grade, students are getting significant amounts of skill building in Steps A, which is really skills for managing and navigating life effectively.
I think when I went to, I think she gave a presentation at the middle school PTA last year or the year before, I forget which year now, but talking about or acknowledging that you have a conflicted feeling. And that you can really have two sides.
Right.
That you feel bad, but you feel good about
Right.
something. And how do you work with that?
Right, and that perspective can be very freeing, I think, for some people to
Right.
realize that two things that seem to be opposing can actually be happening at the same exact time.
Right. I'm sorry that I can't go to the track meet today, but actually I don't want to go to the track meet today. Or, passing a test or doing really well or not having to see a friend and seeing a friend.
Right.
It's
Right.
two sides of things. And when you first started in the high school, do you have time where students come to your office where you
Yeah.
counsel them on?
Yeah, so I can explain sort of how that works. So,
Okay.
Student Assistance offers counseling on a completely voluntary basis. So students can self-refer, they can refer friends. That's very powerful because, we know that it's very typical in the teenage years for friends to know what's going on with each other more so than, maybe some of the adults in their life.
And it's so hard for them to come forward and say, I'm worried about my friend.
Right, right.
Who can they go talk to about that? So
Right.
you're that safe person.
Right, absolutely. The counseling is confidential, with obvious, limitations to confidentiality. Really the idea being, and the way that I describe it to students, is that sometimes students are going through things in life that they want to bounce off an adult and they want to know that it's not going to go anywhere else. That confidentiality is really important.
Yeah.
Parents can make referrals, faculty can make referrals. So I get referrals from different ways. And another really important part of my role, I think, to identify is referrals. So I can make internal referrals. So I work really closely with the high school child study team, for example, really closely with the school psychology department, the school counselors. And if I felt like a student came to me with an issue, which happens, I'm an extra support person in the building, where I know that Dr. Mincari would be a phenomenal resource. I can explain that to the student. They can sign a consent form, and then I can have that conversation with Dr. Mincari. Also make referrals into the community. So if I felt like a student would benefit from, outside counseling therapy,
Right.
I can facilitate that. I go and meet with different private therapists just to get a feel for who they are, their approach.
That's
so when I
important.
meet with students, I kind of can, make sure that it's a good fit, because I
Right.
think in counseling and therapy, that's so important to have the right fit.
It's critical. If you don't connect with your
Right.
person, then it's not going to be effective. And, for students, there's so many different reasons for them to feel unsteady. I'll
Right.
use that word, and that whether it's a learning disability from diagnosed or undiagnosed, right? There's so many kids who are not diagnosed until much, much later, and that
Right.
can add to an anxiety of like, oh, I can't do this. This is so hard. It's so easy for
Right.
my friend. Sports, I don't want to be on sports. My parents want me to be on sports, or my best friend is on sport. I don't want to do that
Right.
anymore. There's so
Right.
many things that get into these kids'
Absolutely.
way.
And even in those situations, those are things that I can normalize for students, who come to me with an issue that they feel like nobody else could really relate to. And I can kind of say, hey, I work with so many of your, peers
Right.
on this, and this is what has worked well for them. What do you think about that? And give a lot of different options.
It's true, because when they have so many negatives stacking up, it's hard to remember the positives. I recently heard a lecture about joy and having a joy box or a joy jar to remember some of the happy things, and that if you're feeling blue, you go to your joy box and you remember some of these great things. It's why we sometimes have photographs of things on
Right.
our wall and whatever. And
Absolutely.
it's a nice, because a lot of times some people I know that's like, yeah, there's nothing good going on right now.
And that's related to so closely to gratitude, which is something that we have in Sources of Strength, which is a wellness program that we have at the high school. It's an evidence-based program for suicide prevention. It's also highly recommended for substance abuse prevention, bullying prevention. But gratitude is one of their big themes that they really focus on. And in January in the high school, we had different gratitude activities that were done.
So what do you mean by gratitude? Like that you're telling people they should, you're helping them feel gratitude? Like, what do you mean?
So you reminded me when you're talking about, really opening up your mind to find those moments of joy.
Right.
So it's really about, in those moments, recognizing things that maybe you would not think of in terms of that gratitude lens. Like, hey, I woke up this morning, I brushed my teeth, I have running water. Like, to actually train your brain to say, wow, that's pretty amazing. That's a fantastic that,
Right.
So those things on a very minor level that are seemingly
Right.
minor are
I had
not.
somebody to drive me to school today.
Exactly.
I ate breakfast.
Right, exactly. And that has come up in the middle school in particular, talking about the fact that this is virtual learning is not ideal, and the fact that we're able to, that we
Yeah.
have the internet, that we're able to, as a
Yeah.
district, provide like laptops for students, you know,
Right.
that's amazing.
There's so many ways that this is all connected with social emotional learning and all of that, and our executive skills that we're learning more and more about. Our kids are programmed in many respects, kindergarten through 12th grade. School is school. This is what you're doing, and everything is structured. And when you get to college, you still have a lot of structure, but now you don't.
Right.
And there's a lot of college kids out there that are really struggling because all of a sudden everything is asynchronous.
Right.
How do I plan my day? My
Right.
mother used to plan my day for me, and as
Right.
did the school schedule. So,
Right, exactly.
and even for our high school and all our kids, those asynchronous days can be a blessing for some.
Right. And it's up to the individual, you
It's up
know.
to the
There are
individual,
some
too.
students who are doing really well in this environment, others who are not.
Right. So that gratitude. So now the sources of strength, that's part of the University of Rochester?
Yeah, so I'll give a little history on
Yeah.
sources of strength. So when I started in Pleasantville, I had a club called Youth to Youth.
Right. I remember that.
Yes, and Sources of Strength has been in the district for about 4 years now.
Okay.
And it comes out of, for New York State, it's a national program, but in New York State,
Oh,
it
okay.
comes out of the University of Rochester, and trainers come annually to Pleasantville. They train students and adult advisors. They really focus on developing relationship peer-to-peer, strengthening those connections, and also student to adult. The thought being, and it's evidence-based for suicide prevention, in that it is found that it increases help-seeking behaviors. So it increases the likelihood that a student, if they were struggling themselves or they saw that a friend was struggling, that they would ask an adult for help,
Okay.
somebody within the school building. We also do, because Youth to Youth and Sources of Strength had so many students in common and very similar missions
Sure.
last year.
You just merged
Yes,
it.
we merged it. So
Yeah.
it's Sources of Strength now. It's a real focus on overall well-being. There's campaigns that we do every few months, and really fundamentally, the idea in Sources of Strength is that there's 8 sources of strength. There's a wheel. It's a colorful wheel. And in times of difficulty, research has shown that people lean on these things like healthy activities, positive friends, mentors, to get through.
Right.
So it really turned out to be something that's really important, I think, as we kind of navigate this pandemic. We've met on Zoom, ever since April. We've had like more members. We had a training in December on Zoom. It's been really helpful, I think, for students
Wow.
during this time.
Is there information, do you have a page on the website with that circle?
I don't believe the circle is on the website.
I feel like we need to,
Yeah.
there's so many, every year there's we should put this on the website. We should put
Right.
that on the website. And we're going to have, some DEI information. I feel like we should,
Yeah.
the SEL, the social emotional learning component, because, we all need to remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of these things,
it's not just for young people too. It's
No,
for all of us.
and if you see that your kid is in need of something, and it's true, because it's what is that joy or what is that gratitude? What words can I use to help? Because you don't want to just say, "Oh, come on, get over it."
Right.
So what is that language? If they're hearing it, one of the things I've always wanted to do, and I've said to my kids' teachers, I want to use the same language,
Right.
so that way it's
Right.
it's the same message.
Yeah. The thing that's great about Sources of Strength is that it's very simple. I think it's one of the best things. It's very simple, straightforward, and I do think that it is very helpful. And in really hard times, the simpler the better, I think, in
Absolutely.
terms of
Don't overthink it.
Right.
I mean, because it's I had an alarm clock to help me get up today. That's a really important thing. Or,
Right.
all right, I didn't do so well on this test, but my feet are facing forward.
And I'm here, I'm doing the best I can. I think that that's also been a theme of like, students, you're doing it. You know, you're
Right.
navigating this really, really, really hard
Really
situation,
hard
and give
time.
yourself credit.
Right, right. And I love that, you know, prevention is the name of your game, and that you now are coming into the middle school.
Right.
Because, you know, when you get your 16-year-old coming into your office, well, it didn't just start yesterday. I mean,
Right.
some kids, of course, it may start in high school, but for many kids, it starts to raise its head
Right.
in earlier years.
Absolutely.
So it's wonderful that you're able to now start opening those conversations in the middle school, normalizing.
Right, absolutely, totally normalizing. And I think, you know, when people think of prevention, it's important to think of it not solely on education. There's other facets. It's very complicated, just in terms of, you know, teenagers really being at a period of life where they're developing the ability to find out who they are, figure themselves out, navigate really complicated social situations. So all of that is complicated, and
It is so complicated. And middle school can be, it is such a roller coaster, right? I
Right.
mean, some kids go through puberty in a minute, and some kids are 16 before they finally start to
Right.
develop into what a
Right.
grown-up looks like. And-
Funny, in prevention ed, the health curriculum that student assistance has, there's a whole lesson dedicated to that, exactly, just that in terms of, you know, changing, developing, everybody's an individual, they're all different, to normalize that for kids, because some kids don't realize that.
Yeah.
You know, like they don't realize that it's really something that for some people happens years later.
Right.
It's important that they know that, because I
Right.
think there can be an emotional impact of that
Right,
as well.
and you know, the friends change, and you know, so that's a big problem. All of a sudden, the responsibilities of middle school class changing and learning how to deal with all those teachers, and
Right.
some kids, you know, a lot of friendship shifts in middle school because of sports.
Right.
All of a sudden, your best friend is doing a sport, and you're like, I don't want to do that sport, I want to do this. So there's a lot of shifts, and that can be upsetting as well.
Absolutely.
And you know, family changes at home.
Exactly.
Also, you know, and what I love, though, aside from the services that you bring to the table, are all the community partnerships that we
Right.
bring, that we have
Absolutely.
in, right? I mean, right now,
It's
we've got the
amazing.
Empowered Living and Break the Hold.
Right, right. I would say that, well, first I would want to mention Pleasantville Strong, because I worked really closely with them.
That's number one, which is how you even got here.
Right,
was,
I know.
you know, from the strategic plan and the wellness committee and Pleasantville Strong being
Right.
developed. So talk
Right.
about that for a minute.
Yeah, so so 5 years ago, we got a drug-free community grant, and we just started the next 5 years, which is really excited.
Yeah.
We were renewed. It's also a time of change within the coalition. Shane McGaffey is the chairperson of Pleasantville Strong, formerly John Muller, who kind of spearheaded
Right.
the coalition. Nicole Malgarinos, our former coalition coordinator, moved to a different opportunity. Now we have Laura Moore. She's our new coordinator. A lot of exciting things happening, and you know, I would encourage anybody, you know, who's listening tonight to get involved with Pleasantville Strong.
Yeah.
It's really, really important that we have a lot of feedback, you know, from the community about how we can best support students and also families. Break the Hold is an amazing community organization. For example, right now I know that they're sponsoring Empowered Living. They're offering parent courses, and they
Correct.
have for many years
They've
now.
done that. I went to them last year,
Yeah.
and I've been to a few things that Empowered Living and Break the Hold have coordinated together with. And, you know, your child is born without a manual.
We're all born without a manual, right?
And, you know, it's an interesting
Yeah.
situation. And, you know, all those different chemicals and biologies and, you know,
Yes.
and they don't always have the same values as you do, which is anher thing that's
Yes.
really hard for a parent to realize. It's like,
Right.
wait a minute, you don't have the same value? No. So
Right.
how do you, and then the body chemistries can impact depressions and anxieties that some
Right.
of our children have, which break the hold. That's how that's how they got started, was
Right.
because of their son.
Right.
So
And I think all community organizations in Pleasantville just recognize how important it is for like the whole family to have support. I think that family wellness is very important, and it's something that is obviously valued here in Pleasantville, just based on all of the community partnerships that we have, and just how willing everybody seems to be to help.
it's important to know that nobody is perfect. And while on the outside, somebody might look like they really have themselves really pulled together, everybody's got something.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a little something, whether it's
Right.
a very noticeable birth
Right.
defect or noticeable eyeglasses or
Right.
something like that. But, we all are complicated packages.
Right.
And having these dialogues is so important.
Yeah.
And, I love that we're bringing a bigger lens to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which ties so closely with social emotional learning. And,
Right.
it's
Yeah, you can't really look at one without looking at the other, because they
right.
definitely overlap.
And then the executive skills, managing your emotions, managing your self-regulation. These are all life skills. How
Absolutely.
we can be humans together.
Right.
In
Exactly.
a space, and you said like you've now got one of the elementary school parents, PTA parents on the Pleasantville Strong Committee.
Yes, that's another exciting addition. So we have Andy Bush, who is the PTA president for BRS on the steering committee of Pleasantville Strong.
Right.
So it's just another movement to starting young, really reuniting as a community to really spread just information, because I do think information is extremely important. And just share ideas about how we can best support the safety and well-being of kids, because that's really what Pleasantville Strong is all
Yeah.
about, fundamentally.
We think our elementary school kids are need this certain level of protection.
Right.
But they're in that middle school before you know it, and
It's true.
again, for the parents to have that awareness. And our kids are smarter and more
Right.
mature sometimes than we think they are.
Yeah.
So they can be ready for conversation. And so many kids, younger and younger, are getting smartphones.
Right.
So they're exposed
Right.
to rap music, which is filled with all kinds of interesting content. They're exposed to TikTok. They're exposed
Right.
to all kinds of
Right.
things that might be a little bit more mature
Right. Yes.
Then
I mean,
their
life is
eyeballs-
certainly different now, like than it was for parents when they were raising kids. And I think it's so great to have community organizations to be able to address some of those issues. How parents can kind of navigate some of those difficult realities together.
It's true. And, for kids, they want to grow up a little faster. So I think that adds to the anxiety and where they don't know how to cope. And then that leads to the self-medication. And, sometimes it's due to a mental illness. I mean, one of my close friends from high school, we all thought it was just alcohol was his problem. But it turned out he had a very serious mental condition that only started when he was showing its head when he was about 17. And, and at one of the, I think it was a Break the Hold and Colleen Wagner was speaking, and the guest speaker was on a video, and he talked about, he was bipolar, and he talked about most of his life until he was about 15, he was on the positive side. What's it called when you're bipolar? It's positive or negative? No, I forget what it's called, but he was on the positive, and then when he was mid-teens, he dropped into a deep depression, and that's the bipolar. That was a very impactful meeting.
Right.
And that's something we need to know as parents and educators, that they say when you notice a big shift in somebody's appearance.
Right. I think one of the biggest, points that I would want to make related to that would be in terms of substance abuse and mental health, co-occurring disorders. Co-occurring disorders are 100% preventable. So what we want is we want to normalize the conversation that, mental health challenges do exist. They're not uncommon in adolescents, and we want to identify that, and we want we want students to feel comfortable talking about it so they don't then take that step of being really uncomfortable and confused and turning to alcohol or other drugs, because it also will mask, symptoms. It can be very confusing after somebody starts to use. You don't really know, what is the substance use, what's the mental health issue. It's more complicated.
Exactly.
So we really give that message to students that, normalize a conversation if you're not feeling well. Talk to a parent, guardian, talk to somebody at school. There are people here to help you.
Right. And understanding, back to the executive skills, I know from my own outside world, ADHD, for example, the prefrontal cortex is not fully formed. We all know this. The prefrontal cortex is not formed until you're about 25. So you're not you don't have those strong executive skills anyway. But for example, people with ADHD, they have a 30% delay in their executive age. So a 15-year-old is more like an 11-year-old.
Right.
So they're really, if they're struggling in other ways, they're definitely not going to be able to make good decisions. So having their friends around, normalizing this conversation the way you're doing in the classroom is really, really,
exactly.
Really...
And when somebody has a proper diagnosis, they can understand, they can learn about,
it's so true.
Their diagnosis.
It's really true. And that's another thing you don't necessarily get a pamphlet on.
Right.
And you get, if you get dyslexia, well, we know it means you don't read very well, but what does it really mean?
Right.
What are all the things that can touch?
Right.
Dysgraphia. And think about it. If you're having trouble getting your thoughts into your pen, how does that impact your competence and confidence about yourself?
I think for many, who are, diagnosed after experiencing that discomfort, it can be very freeing. And it can, it will decrease the likelihood of that lack of confidence kind of enduring when they can really understand what their challenges are. And how sometimes things that we view as deficits can be like superpowers in different ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we can't have everybody be the same.
No, exactly.
The world would be really boring.
Right.
The world would be really, really boring. Right. And if everybody was the same, we wouldn't have some of these amazing inventors and creative people
100%.
all over the place. So, what's really challenging for some kids in high school, they go on to produce amazing things.
Absolutely.
So I love that. We do have all of this normalcy. You mentioned, I'm looking at some notes that I took when we were talking the other day about increasing, the self-awareness and individuality, the diversity, and that empathy. And one of your students said something that she sees every face is beautiful.
Right. Yeah, it was on Instagram. It was like
it was an Instagram
video
thing, but still,
it was an Instagram video. It was she said she understands what social views of beauty are. Like she gets that, but for her, every single face that she sees is absolutely beautiful. And just like she said it with such passion, and it was so sincere. And I think that is just, so amazing that we have to look at people on individual basis.
It really is true because, I could stand on a street corner for hours watching people walk by. Yeah. I love what they choose to wear. I love their hair, their body language. Yeah. There are so many fascinating aspects of the human person.
Right, exactly. And that's always how I've been trained to, to work with people as individuals. People are experts on, well, sometimes they're not experts on themselves. Sometimes they're trying to learn about themselves, but I think you have to open up that dialogue, actually, engaging in conversations with students to really understand them.
And, we live in a very, Westchester County, it's a very competitive environment. So there's that. The parents are competitive with each other, their children, there's a lot of that. And when you get out into the world, different colleges can provide different opportunities, and you start to realize to try and be true to yourself, because whether you're an artist or a mathematician or whatever.
Right.
So,
and I think it goes back to what you said earlier, just about values, and like as you're developing through adolescence, teenagers are developing what matters to them. Right. And I think that's part of like the whole self-discovery of adolescence. And it really is interesting conversations to have with students around value systems and how
Sure.
it,
And they're pushing, right? They push. Now that they've got these smartphones, they're
Right.
seeing, as I said, they're seeing content. So it's like, oh, let's push and see what
Right.
that's going to mean. And then
Right.
they get pushed back, and their peers are like, no, don't do that. Oh, that's really funny.
right,
And-
exactly, yeah.
The
Exactly.
likes,
Right.
They've gotten rid of some of I think some of the social platforms have gotten rid of the
Yeah.
likes for that reason.
Exactly.
Because if there's the likes, then I'm going to
Right.
keep doing it.
When you're trying to figure out who you are, what matters, if you're getting that, external approval
Right.
as being so important, that can be really,
And it doesn't go
detrimental.
away. I mean,
Yeah.
we live it into our 80s, wanting
Yeah.
friends and feeling anxious about this, that, and the other thing. So it's, there was a great article, a little essay in the Times a couple of weeks ago about another part of normalizing the conversation, the puberty movies. Why don't we have everybody see the
Right.
movies together? Just imagine if boys and girls learned
Right.
together with boys and, because it's simple biology.
Right, exactly.
But we keep it very, very separate. We're not ready
Right.
for that to be totally normalized. But, we want everybody to feel included. So that's part of that
Right.
inclusion
Right.
in a way.
Right. Being honest, about different things that face us as
about
humans.
our bodies.
Right.
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 So I think, I don't know, I'm looking at our notes. We've covered the community partnerships, our social emotional advances, sources of strength. Is there anything that we didn't cover? I mean, we could sit here for a very
know.
long time and talk about all these things. You do have your page, and actually what's really great is on the PCO e-blast, is
Right.
they have a really nice spot for you.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's also on the middle school.
Yes.
It
yeah,
is?
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So people
I
can
send things to both the middle school and the high
Right,
school.
so people can definitely find you.
Yes.
There's one other partnership that we didn't talk about, I just want to quickly mention, is the Harris Project.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Because
yes,
they
yeah.
came to a presentation, I think it was a SEPTA presentation.
They
No.
they came to Stephanie Marcasano, who's the head of the Harris Project.
Right.
She came to a Red Ribbon Week speaker event for students and also for parents.
Right, that's what
Yeah.
it was. Okay.
So Stephanie Marcasano is the founder of the Harris Project. It's the only nonprofit actually in the country to spread awareness about co-occurring disorders.
That is becoming very big. I've listened, paid attention to, participated in some summits, and last week's there were 4 speakers on co-occurring disorders. So that's an additional,
Right.
awareness, which is
Yeah.
huge.
I think it's also like co-occurring disorders have really existed for forever.
Well, like I just said,
But-
my friend, my high school friend, he had a mental condition and was becoming an alcoholic
Right.
because of that.
Right, and now we're finally viewing them in one conversation, and I think that that's so important. It really resonates with students. I think that students have really, have such interest in mental health. They get it,
Yeah.
they really do. They look to normalize the conversation. So to have that united conversation about drugs and alcohol and mental health challenges is so important.
It really is.
The thing I like the best about the Harris Project, they have a peer leadership program that they call CODA, Co-Occurring Disorder Awareness. And we've been able to, with Sources of Strength, basically every school who has had, the Harris Project in, they kind of use different elements of CODA to fit their school. So,
Okay.
for us, we have inserted it into Sources of Strength. So
Okay.
every April, there's co-occurring disorder awareness week, and the Harris Project provides boxes, celebration boxes. There's the Youth Summit. There's one every year at Westchester County Center. It didn't happen last March.
Oh, yeah.
It was supposed to be March 18th, I think. I think there's going to be one this year, but it's going to be virtual. It's the messaging is just so hopeful, so optimistic. Even though Stephanie's story of tragedy, she lost her
terrible.
son to a drug overdose.
Right.
After he struggled with anxiety, ADHD for
Right.
most of his life. She really, the message is very simple, and I think it really ties into everything that's happening right now in the middle school, the high school. It's just about connection. It's
Yeah.
about how powerful human connection can be.
It really, and right now, we don't have enough connection.
Right.
That connection has been disrupted.
Right.
And the things that the kids are learning today, it's like the Heimlich maneuver. You don't need it until you need it.
Right.
And while right now some of these kids, they think, oh, why do I even need to know this? They might find in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, something may be in their lives where this information that they're getting today is going to come in handy. It's like, oh wait, I know this.
Right.
I recognize this.
Right.
Let me help this person.
Right, exactly.
And that's really, right, the education. That's what
Yep.
it's all about.
Right, exactly. And instilling that kind of trust in kids to trust their gut and, get help when you need it. I
Trust the
think-
gut.
Yeah, really important. It's not
Right.
scientific, but
It's not scientific, but you know something? I mean, in so many circumstances, when you trust your gut, when you
Yeah.
follow your gut, it
Right.
says, oh, don't do this, or
Right.
oh, this is what we need to do.
Right.
And often when we don't trust our gut,
Right.
it's like, why didn't I trust my gut?
right. And I think so much of what we're doing with students too is trying to have them build that sense of mastery. Like they
Right.
can handle things that are thrown to them and believe when they have a thought, believing in themselves and acting on it.
Right, and I think that's the message for all of us parents. Our kids actually have a lot more strength than we might think they do. And if they're given the information and the opportunity to learn about who they are and what they are and their friends and whatever, they will learn how to work with that.
Right, absolutely.
And again, themselves, diversity, inclusion, emotional intelligence, validation, prevention, all of these things.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank Mary Ann Flatley for taking the time today on Inside Pleasantville Schools. Our last episode we talked about student choices, and they do have a lot of choices socially and academically, and it can be overwhelming for some of our kids. And we're here to help. Okay, we're here to help our students learn about themselves, and we're here to help them strengthen themselves, and also to help the parents so that we're all learning how to make the best choices possible. So thank you so much for joining us today at Inside Pleasantville Schools, and look forward to us at our next edition. Have a great day.
Thank you.